Hello, seekers and knowers. This channel is for the questioners of a world turned upside down, those who want to know, and those who already see. If you ever wondered what the fuck is going on here, this channel is for you. My name is Asha Asteria. Now let's get into it. Welcome to the channel, the Gnostic Viewpoint. I'm Asha, and in this video, we're going to be talking about how Christianity has destroyed spirituality and really the world. Um, so we're gonna get into it because at this point in time, this is when I'm recording this. This is September of 2025, and recently we have been, as a nation. I live in the United States of America. As a nation, this is following the passing or the murder of CK. I don't really want to say the name, but and right now there's a lot of anger coming from the right toward the left, which what's new in that? That's pretty normal behavior for them. But they feel even more angry, even though nobody fully understands why, because the person who murdered this man in front of a crowd of students at a school, and I believe it was in Utah, was basically one of their own, further right, uh, one of their own. And the thing is, the reason why I kind of had the idea to make this video. Firstly, you can never do enough to talk about the damage that Christianity has done to this world and to the minds of its followers in particular. But I think what triggered me the most as a black woman in this country is how many black people were saying that they are a Christian first before they are black, despite the things that this person, CK, had said to diminish, disparage, and further the stereotype of black people in this country to accomplish the political aims of the right, which is to invalidate black people in this country and subjugate them, taking away, our jobs and the DEI programs, affirmative action, et cetera, et cetera, because they believe in their minds that they are deserving for whatever reason. And the right has a very fundamentalist Christian uh, point of view. So, this apparently, I mean, this death really did bring people out of the woodworks to show us how they really feel. It really was interesting. Like it really has been an interesting time. The situation happened 6 days ago, and since then it's been a revelation of where people's viewpoints are, who they support, that they may not have openly felt comfortable with supporting, but the situation that happened made them feel uh, emboldened to show that. So what was most disappointing to me was the black people, really, to be quite honest, who found themselves supporting this person because of his Christian and conservative viewpoints. And, they said they were a Christian first. So, I've been wanting, this is probably going to be the first video as I kick off this channel. This channel used to be years ago a tarot reading channel for me. And I still have a lot of subscribers from then. So, to those subscribers, welcome back. I hope you choose to stay with where I'm going with this channel. And to anybody who's new here, welcome. Thank you for joining me, and I can't wait. Um, I want to talk about the reason this channel is called the Gnostic Viewpoint is because I want to get into topics present and of the past that from a spiritual occult. I mean, I come primarily from an occult, esoteric, spiritual background, but I view myself as a Gnostic, which is basically a knower, someone who feels as if they have a knowledge and an understanding of spirituality and what's going on underneath the surface of this physical world that we live in. So a lot of the channel's topics are going to be coming from spirituality from that viewpoint and coming from what's going on in the world from that viewpoint so that I can add knowledge to it so that we can become knowers and free ourselves of ignorance to the highest degree possible. So I'm going to take my time with this. Um, so I don't know how long this is going to be, but I know that I need to lay this out as thoroughly as I can in this particular video. Of course, we will probably be circling back around to the topic of Christianity in other videos because you can't really talk a whole lot about spirituality without talking about Christianity or the Judeo Christian Muslim religions. They are the ones who have the most supporters in this world. And Gnosticism is very connected to Christianity. Um, they were contemporary points of view. Um, Gnosticism was something that kind of existed alongside the Hebrew religion, which originally, which the Christ figure that was created came out of. Um, the Hebrew religion, the Israelites, and then, from this Christ figure, sometime after came Christianity. Okay, so we're gonna just kind of talk about a little bit about the basis of Christianity and and kind of what it does and the viewpoints and all of these different things, how it spread. I think that's really important because this religion has kind of hijacked spirituality completely, you know, and it has presented itself as the only one way to approach the unknown, the unseen, the spiritual realm. You know, it gives a lot of value to obedience, to non-questioning, um, control of your behavior, control of your thoughts. Um, it uses tactics like guilt and fear um, to keep its followers in line, and forgiveness when some extremely egregious things happen. And I feel like it is a very, like, though I label myself a Gnostic, okay, the primary reason for that label is due to what it means. Gnosis meaning knowledge. Okay, I truly believe in seeking knowledge, and I truly believe in liberating your soul through seeking knowledge, and then applying that spiritually. Now, that's just a general label. As far as my spirituality personally, I'm open. Knowledge comes from everywhere and everything. You can learn from everywhere, everything. And um, universal knowledge, energetic knowledge. Um, you know, I'm very much connected. I have a very strong connection to ancient Kemetic spirituality. I have a very strong connection to Hindu, and to Buddhist spirituality. These are topics that I'm going to cover in all of my videos. Really, all of my videos are going to touch on a lot of different things. I believe in the universal laws as laid out and found in the Kabbalion. One of my favorite spiritual books is the Tao Te Ching. So my thing is, you can gain knowledge anywhere. You know, there's always something you can gain. Um, I was a Christian, raised a Christian when I was growing up, as a lot of people are in the United States, and um, I tried to make that work for me, but it never landed. Ever since I was young, I had questions that were not that I knew I could never truly ask. I knew, very early in Christianity, you learn very early that you're not supposed to question. Faith is a huge thing, so you're supposed to have faith. You can't question this God. You can't challenge. You can't, whatever. You're supposed to just believe whatever is said and have faith, which already sets you up for accepting ignorance. It sets you up for accepting that you don't need to know everything. You're supposed to put your faith in this God, and that's it, And the only reason you even know about this is because it was taught to you and ingrained in you and indoctrinated into you 9 times out of 10 from the time you were born, from childhood. I was baptized into the Lutheran church when I was a baby. So there was no choice on my end. And even the religions that require you to be older to be baptized, I want to say Mormons are like that, Jehovah Witnesses are like that. It's still, you're supposed to freely choose. I think the Amish give you a time of being free before you become baptized into the religion that you're supposed to live out for the rest of your life. But it really doesn't matter if you're given a choice to baptize if this is what's been indoctrinated into you from the time that you were a child. 9 times out of 10 is only going to lead one way. Not everyone has the courage to question. And for me, questioning is the very beginning of your search. I was a Christian up until about the year 2008, and that was the year after I had my oldest daughter. And around that time, I was seeking, searching, wanting um, a deeper connection, you know. And it started off with, at the time, the thing that was really cool, or that they was really talking about, was manifestation, The Secret. Okay, The Secret, the book, the video, and that was given to me in 2007 when my daughter was born. So I watched the video, and it kind of piqued my interest and gave me a different perspective about um, our connectedness to the universe. The idea that you can manifest, or that you can attract favorable circumstances through just believing it enough, or convincing yourself, being a delulu, as they say now, um, to manifest it and make it happen. I was pretty intrigued by that. I've always been a very curious person. Ever since I was young, I read everything I could read. I was always very interested in history. I always wanted to know more. Um, and so that's why, I accepted the fact that I was a Christian and couldn't really question, because I believed, before this year, or before 2007, 2008, I believed that I was supposed to have faith, and act as the rest of the Christians do, everybody else around me. So, but I did have things in my mind that I kept to myself, but I just kind of dealt with the fact that that would be unresolved. I did try to become more into the Bible at various different points in time. Um, and so Anyway, so as I said, 2007, 2008 is when I started to open my mind. It was in 2008 that I got into meditation, um, that I learned about Buddhist chants, particularly the chant of the Lotus Sutra and Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Um, and the reason was because I used to watch one of my favorite movies. And it's like I'm going into a lot of details, but I kind of want to give a background of who I am so that you know where I'm coming from, um, with my thoughts, ideas, and where I've gone and where I've been and how I came to get the knowledge I have now. So, but yeah, I used to love in my like senior year of high school, I used to love the movie What's Love Got to Do with It. And if you remember, Tina Turner speaks or shows in that movie her conversion to Buddhism and how it saved her. And I always been a seeker spiritually. Like I said, I always had questions. I've always been a questioner and I've always been a seeker. And I've always felt connected spiritually in some kind of way, even though I didn't really fully understand or embrace it. Like I wasn't a super religious girl, growing up. And my mom, she didn't really go to church a lot. I ended up joining my own church in high school. And, I read the Bible myself starting, at various different times. So I was always drawn in and intrigued with spirituality without even without consciously realizing it, I guess I could say. So it was in 2008 that I started to meditate, and meditation really changed my life. I mean, it really just opened up so much for me. Like to this day, I can never ever espouse meditation enough. Even though I don't meditate as much as I would need to or would like to, there's just something about it. I used to have insomnia, before. I never have truly had insomnia since. There may be some points in time where I'm really stressed out, but if I can meditate, if I can clear this in mind and quiet it down, go into a good trance state, I'm good. You know what I mean? I'm good. It allows you to have an inner peace that is pretty unshakable. You know, it can only get shaken unless you want to get shook up, unless that's what you want to do. But it really is amazing. So around this time in 2008, I started to feel very connected to the universe, so to speak. And I was asking questions and just having a lot of thoughts. I started journaling in 2008. And I mean, I kept journals when I was younger, but I started to really journal what I was going through. Like, I would just ask questions and the answers would be given to me, and I would open books and see what I was trying to find out and hear things. I was just really feeling very connected, very connected. At this time, I had, as I said, I was primarily interested. I knew a little bit about ancient Kemet. I already had a Ankh tattooed on me from the time I was 18. So I knew a little something about Assyrian drama, Aset, uh, Asar, and Heru. I was incorporating some Buddhism, some meditation, some chanting at the time, and reading my New Testament. I just was going to take all of that and just put it all together and come up with my own understanding or aspect of spirituality, because I always was connected to the words of the Christ. I always felt like there was a resonance there. And so, I was into that. So it was that year, 2008, when toward the end of the year, when I had a friend who was in prison, and he was going on his own spiritual journey, and we had been writing each other. I met him when I was in college, but he ended up going to prison sometime after. He was there for 4 years, and we stayed in touch. We wrote each other or whatever. And he had told me about being a Hebrew Israelite. Okay. So, long story short on that, I went ahead and adopted that viewpoint, which, not recognizing it at the time, it closed a lot of doors. It kind of closed off everything that was opening for me. Because as a Hebrew Israelite, you become very fundamentalist about this Bible. Like, you start to study it, you know, which the studying that I did, there was a lot of studying, because for me, when I get into something, I go deeply into it. So I learned a lot and I studied a lot. And it helps me now because when I go to talk about a lot of these topics, you'll know that my background is to study this Bible, not just what it says in English, but also the Hebrew words, the Greek words, to make connections between different scriptures, whatever. I was in that Bible. I was really trying to be what I felt like Yahweh wanted me to be. Okay. I felt like everything had led up to this thing. So that went on for like only a couple years. Um, and the reason that only lasted a couple years is because, like I said, I obsessively get into things. I'm an Aries sun with a Scorpio rising. I obsessively get into things. If I'm into it, I'm fully into it. There's no half stepping with me. So I be up all night to the middle of the night studying scripture, reading all the time, keeping the Sabbath or whatever. I got married around that time. And yeah, I named my children, my daughter, after the God of the Bible in a way. I really was into this thing. So being into it, I decided I was going to read the Bible again from the beginning to the end. That was the goal. Okay. I'm going to talk about this in another video, one that I've already recorded, but I'm going to eventually upload it. But in that video, it should be the one where I talk about let's see, what am I going to title it in case it happens to be uploaded when you're watching this. Um the biblical suppression of the divine feminine. I think that's what I'm going to call it. Anyway, I talk about in there why reading the Bible made me a non-believer of the Bible, or the Judeo-Christian Hebrew Israelite religion, yada yada yada. Um, I got to, I believe it was Judges, the last few chapters of Judges. I had already been hanging on by a thread. That book is so full of violence. It's so full of violence that I couldn't. There was a lot that I couldn't make sense of. And like I said, it came to the point where the questions, like I said, I'm a natural questioner. I can't just accept what's given to me. I'm the type that needs to know. I need to know more. I need to know the reason. I need to know this. I need to know that. I need to know. So at the time I'm married and I met my husband through this religion, but I'm asking him like why this and why that. And he's telling me I can't question, that I need to just accept what is going on or what's happening. And I wasn't trying to hear that. Like I got to especially when I got to Judges. I mean, like I said, when I do that video, I'm gonna go into the detail of it. I don't want to do that again in this video because I know I've already done that and I don't want to get into the detail of it. But I'm just gonna say that that shit, you child. I was like, fuck this shit, man. I was done. I was done. But what I'll say is I walked away with all of this knowledge and all of this ability to study and see underneath this book. So, and by this time as an Israelite, we were already against Christianity, because we felt like, in order for the nation of Israel to be for us to lift these curses, okay? If anybody's been a Israelite, you know about Deuteronomy 28, you know about the curses and all that. And you know that the main thing is you're supposed to turn back to Yah and follow the laws that are laid out in the Torah in order to lift these curses. So we kind of were already against Christianity. I was already against it because I felt like it was a religion that kept us away from following the law, because it gave us this idea that the Christ Jesus had already fulfilled the law. I called him Yeshua, and I still do. Yeshua fulfilled the law or whatever, because first I was messianic Hebrew Israelite, then I became non-messianic simply because I interpreted the scriptures as the savior was going to be Israel, not one particular person out of Israel, but Israel as a nation. And that's what I had come to study, the what they call the Old Testament, or the Tanakh, what it had come to mean. So I was already, against Christianity. And at that time, I felt it was my mission to turn everybody I knew away from Christianity and move them toward being a Hebrew Israelite. And I was really, like I said, going really hard in that at the time. All right. Now, thankfully, I'm at a point in time where the idea of sitting there trying to turn people toward whatever it is that you believe to be the right thing or the thing that this God is watching you and expecting you to do is complete fucking bullshit. But that's what I was believing at the time, and that's what I was trying to do, saving souls and all this other stuff. Christianity as a religion is very much summed up in the very ironic saying that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. A lot of these people believe that they have good intentions, that they're saving your soul from going to hell. And, you got to bend the knee and every tongue shall confess and all this other shit, you know, um, in order to be accepted by the God of the Bible, whatever, through the son that he sacrificed. So, their intentions are a lot of times good, but the way that this religion molds the mind is is scary, to say the least. I mean, it's really hard to put words into it until you are on the other side of it, because when you're in it, when you make that your whole world, when that becomes the world that you live in, um, the universe that you reside in, then there's really nothing else you can see. And considering that we have the rest of the society that fosters this and promotes this and accepts this, now it's a groupthink mentality, and this religion has gone on for literally thousands of years at this point, a couple thousand years. So we about to get into it. All right. Um so first I wanted to talk, I don't, I got a loose structure here because I did want to talk about some things, but we're going to go through some of these talking points and kind of give a basis of where this Christianity even came from. So we're going to start off with Constantine, okay? Constantine was a Roman emperor around the 300s AD, okay? He was called Constantine the Great. And he was the first Roman emperor to convert to Christianity, okay? And the story goes a little now, to give some backstory to this. If you look in the New Testament, if you look in the Gospels, you know that Israel is under Roman occupation. Okay, this is why you have Yeshua saying, "Give unto Caesar what is Caesar's," or whatever. You know what I'm saying? When they were saying they had to pay some tax or something like that. Render unto Caesar what is his, or whatever the case. Basically, he's saying just go with it. Whatever. Um, so they were under a Roman occupation, and the Israelites we're just gonna say that they were a brown Middle Eastern people. Now, anybody who is still a Hebrew Israelite is probably screaming right now that it's the black people and we're the lost children of Israel and we're in America and yada yada yada. Okay, yeah, I do believe that they were a black people, but you know, um, for the sake of, because I don't feel like getting into the history of the Bible and the history of the Israelites and what they look like and all that. It doesn't really matter, but we do know that Christ was called bronze colored. Okay, so let's just say they're brown colored people or whatever. Um, and they are under occupation by these Europeans, the Romans. Okay, and the Yeshua figure ended up becoming crucified due to, according to the biblical story, due to blasphemy for calling himself the Son of God or whatever, and his own people wanted him crucified, whatever, you know what I'm saying? So this is I just bring this part up to say that this is the beginning of the relationship that you see between Israel and Rome. Okay, and that they were already under Roman occupation after having been enslaved by various different peoples, as found in the Old Testament or whatever. And so this is where they found themselves, okay? So the crucifixion, this was the Rome doing this to him, whatever. So, and he died, as they say, around like 32 AD, 32 AD, 33 AD or whatever, where our calendar comes from or whatever. But so we have Constantine coming around about 300 years later or so. Okay, so by this time, by the time that the apostles created their documents or whatever, again, I'm not trying to get into a deep biblical history about the time of which it was written, because all of the gospels were written after the Christ figure had died, many years after. Okay, and then we have the apostles coming in after that, so whatever the case, the apostles were going around spreading Christianity or whatever, which at first Rome wasn't into. They wasn't feeling it, you know, and especially because they had killed this guy. The way I saw it, especially when I was an Israelite, I always saw Yeshua as a bit of a revolutionary. I still believe, if this figure existed, which I don't think he existed as one person, he could have been an amalgamation about three or four different people or whatever who came around at the time and were crucified or whatever the case. But whether he was one person or whether he was multiple people or whether the whole shit was made up, he has a certain bit of a revolutionary tone, as far as him not wanting to participate in or conform to the society of Rome or even of Israel. He was mad at the Sadducees and the Pharisees, probably for about the same reason I don't care for Christianity now. This control that they have over people and whatever, and their misunderstanding of spirituality or whatever. So anyway, so he wasn't down with them. He wasn't down with Israel, really. Um and he also wasn't really down with Rome or whatever. Like, he's just kind of going around, just doing whatever, healing people, yada yada yada, creating a little chaos here and there, whatever, spreading the gospel word, whatever. That's basically what he was doing. So Rome didn't much care for him anyway. Like, he wasn't upholding the status quo as a person who's a part of an occupied nation. So, they didn't care for him anyway. So, anyway, but after he dies, Christianity grows, as we know. It starts to flourish, but they were still being persecuted, according to them, thrown to the lions and, all of these different things. So, so there was that going on. So, like I said, roughly about 300 years later, we have Constantine. And the story of Constantine, okay, he's an emperor. And, his big story is that he converted because he was in battle one time. And while he was in battle, he looked up at like the blazing sun. And here, let me see, where can I find? Because I got some websites in front of me. Here's a good Christian website. All right. Um, So we have in 8312, it says, um, it says here, in 8312, the Roman Empire is up for grabs. Its previous empire, Diocletian, divided the realm between two senior and two junior emperors, but the complex arrangement has collapsed. The successors are at one another's throats. Young General Constantine, son of Constantius, one of Diocletian's co-emperors, has military successes under his belt, but now faces a formidable veteran with a larger army and a better strategic position. What shall he do? Okay. He realizes that, it says here that Constantine realizes that he needs help from a power greater than himself, but who or what? He has his doubts about the traditional Roman gods. He prays earnestly that the true God, quote unquote, whoever that may be, reveal to him who he is and stretch forth his right hand to help him. He does not know it yet, but the prayer will change the course of Christian history as well as Western civilization, quote unquote civilization. Later, he will tell his friend Bishop Eusebius the incredible story of that hour. When Eusebius reports it in his history, he admits it's hard to believe. So the thing that is hard to believe, Constant suddenly sees a bright cross of light emblazoned across the noonday sky, and upon it the inscription "In hoc signo vinces." In this sign conquer. Now, that's what the this Christian site says. So basically, Constantine, he ends up converting to Christianity because while he's in a battle and this that he's trying to win, he sees this cross across the sky, and in Latin we have "in hoc signo vinces," which means "in this sign conquer." Okay, so I feel like the reason I bring this up, okay, firstly, this marks the beginning of, because as the site has mentioned, Rome has all these different gods. Okay, I'm an astrologer, so all of the planets, those are all Roman gods. Okay, I'm sure anybody who knows or is into astrology knows those are the gods and goddesses of Rome. Okay, and they came as a they gave rise from the Greek gods who have a almost a one-to-one correlation with the Roman gods. All right. And also, I when I was doing this research, and it was saying how it was actually in Greek, um that the phrase, or in this be victorious, I think that was the Greek phrase. But ultimately, this marks the beginning of Constantine, because we already know Constantine as an emperor has power, and because of his wins, he was able to gain more power. Okay, so in 312, as he gained more power, well, after this battle, it seems that he has gained more power, and he in 312 is when he becomes baptized into let's see, what does it say? It says, beginning on, this is Wikipedia, in 312, finally becoming a Christian and being baptized by Eusebius of Nicomedia, an Arian bishop, although the Catholic Church and the Coptic Orthodox Church maintain that he was baptized by Pope Sylvester. He played an influential role in the proclamation of the Edict of Milan in 313, which declared tolerance for Christianity in Roman Empire. All right. So after he becomes Christian, he then puts together this Council of Nicaea, which happened in 325 AD. And at the Council of Nicaea is when they formalize. This is the council where they formalize the books that are going to be placed into the Bible, because um, some Bible scholars may know that the Bible there are other books, um, the Apocrypha. I believe those can be found in Catholic Bibles, so those are additional books of the Bible. And then you also have the pseudepigrapha, which are other books, but they're called pseudo. They're the origin is questionable. So also you have a lot of Gnostic texts. Um, you know, especially so there's a lot of different other texts that are not included in the Bible. So in the Council of Nicaea is where they kind of put together the official 66 books of the Bible or whatever. Okay, so this is where you see Christianity becoming formalized. And now I bring up the in hoc signo vinces because this is the firstly, the the images you can see on your screen right now are crosses with this word on it. And if you recall, by this sign you conquer. All right, so there's already a conquering kind of energy and spirit with Christianity, as it becomes formalized. Because after this time, this as with him being the emperor, okay, he starts to move the Roman Empire toward his God, Christianity, which then causes them to have to start converting to his religion. Um, it says he is venerated as a saint in Eastern Christianity, and he did much to push Christianity toward the mainstream of Roman culture. All right, so he was a huge figure in making Christianity mainstream. Before this, Christianity was probably done by a few people, you know, not really a big deal or whatever. But as it became more mainstream, this is it starts to put an end to the pagan gods of old. Um, and this starts to happen not just there, but everywhere, because also you have to understand one of the basic tenets of Christianity is to declare this gospel all over the world to the ends of the earth. Everybody is supposed to know about this. So this is kind of marking the beginning of this, where you have a prominent figure in a what am I saying? You have a prominent figure who has now taken this as his religion, and now he is pressing others to follow this religion as well. Okay, pressing others in his country to follow this religion as well. All right. So, and like I said, there's a conquering energy. By this sign, you conquer. Okay, by this sign, you're able to, and the sign is the sign of the cross, which is already a symbol of death just in and of itself. It was the instrument used to kill the savior of the religion, the Messiah. So this is supposed to have high significance, especially if you're talking about in the Catholic Church, where you have the Eucharist, the body and the blood being consumed. And, there's a lot of blood, death. Firstly, I mean, I want to say in Christianity, but it really starts off in the Old Testament. This is why I said it was hard for me to get through it, because I'm like, this is a very violent God. That's what I came to really deeply understand. And now that I understand this God's nature more, the God of the Bible, which we'll talk about in further videos or in future videos, now that I understand him more, I see why he is this way, who he was before he was hijacked and brought into the Israelites' culture or whatever. Um, and why the legacy since then has been war. Christianity has gone all across the world, from the Crusades to the Spanish Inquisitions, forcing itself upon people, forcing itself. Also, missionaries. To this day, there's still missionaries that go around to these different countries that they consider primitive, and and convert them into Christianity. So to this day, Christianity still does the thing that it had set out to do in the beginning: destroy the gods, the quote unquote pagan gods of old, and replace it with this one God. Because different countries, different cultures all had their own gods that were made in their own images, that served the people that lived in that area. And it was kind of understood. This is why there's a commandment: thou shalt not have any other gods before me. This is an admission that there are other gods, and that none of those gods should be placed before the God of the Bible. The God of the Bible wanted to be the only one. And the thing is, as you understand how God's deities work, they work through energy. You feed a deity and give them power through your energy, okay, which is your prayers, your songs, your dances, your rituals, whatever, your belief. This is how they live, so to speak. They live through the energy that you feed them. You know, this is why in ancestral spirituality, you literally feed your ancestors. You leave food on the altar. You leave drink on the altar for them. Whatever it is that they like, whatever it is that they were into when they were alive. The same thing is with gods. If you have ever practiced magic or, ritual work, then you know that when you're working with a god, you find out the things that this god likes. You find out what colors, what scents, what incense they like. Do they like alcohol or no? What is it that draws and attracts them in order to solicit their help in whatever it is that you're trying to do. So the God of the Bible wanted all of that energy for himself. He wanted everybody on this earth to worship him and to give their energy to him, which thus expands his power. So this as Rome begins to push, as we start with Constantine's baptismal or baptism, and then we have the Council of Nicaea only 7 years, what is this, 8 years later, 325 AD, where the books are formalized. So now it becomes a more formal religion. All right. So gone are the pagan gods, gone are the witches, and through series of wars and the taking of land and literally killing people who didn't accept the religion, torturing people into becoming adherents of it. Because I mean, once you torture one generation, you torture one, and let's say that generation is like, okay, I want to live. That person's like, I want to live, so I'm gonna go ahead and just say I worship this God. So I'm just gonna go through the motions. I may still have my own religion, kind of on the low, but I'm just going to say that I worship this God. When they have children, they're going to still go through these motions because they are now having to go through, now they have to attend church or attend mass or whatever. Now they have to, go through all these things. So the child, this is all that they really see. This is all that they really know. And so what happens is that child grows up with that religion, adopts that religion, and then passes it on down to their own children. So what started off as maybe malicious compliance, someone just kind of going along with it just because they want to live and survive and not be killed, okay, because this occupation may have taken over their the land that they live in, and now everybody's expected to convert to Christianity. Then, or like what was happening in England or Great Britain, where we have one king is Catholic and one king is Protestant, and then now everybody has to switch back and forth to whatever the ruler of the society says. This is how Christianity has grown. This is how Christianity has spread, and Christianity doesn't leave any other options. You have to worship this God. There's only one way. There is no open-mindedness. There is no accepting. Now they do take and hijack a lot of their rituals and their traditions, such as Easter, which was originally a festival for Astarte. Again, another conversation for another day. That's why Easter, Esther, a star, you know, this was hers. It was fertility or whatever. They hijacked that, gave that to the Christ figure. They took Christmas, which would, at one point was Saturnalia, which is in the Capricorn season, which is, Saturn rules Capricorn and, whatever. Then we have the sun, the story of the sun, dying, appearing to die in the sky or whatever. It doesn't move for 3 days and then it begins to rise back up again. So we have that. They have that hijacked. We have them hijacking Christmas trees, because it explicitly says, I want to say it's in Jeremiah, I'll put the verse up, where, you should not do as the pagan do around you and take a tree, which was, connected to the god Tammuz or Dumuzi. That was another name for him. Okay, he was represented by a tree. There was someone else represented by a tree, and they used to take these trees, the evergreen tree, and decorate it and all this different things and put lights or candles on it and all this different stuff. So they were explicitly told, I believe in Jeremiah or Isaiah, but I think it was Jeremiah, not to follow the ways of the pagan and do this thing. And now it's like a staple for Christmas is to have a Christmas tree. Like Christianity, as it grew, it didn't, because in a way for them to be able to grow, that they to the extent that they did, though they were not tolerant of other gods and were not tolerant of a lot of practices, they did take them and maybe rework those practices and give it back to the people as something that they're already familiar with to some degree. They're already having festivals around that time of the year anyway. So we're just going to say these are Christian festivals now. And then we do this in honor of the God of the Bible and of Christ. Okay, so they were able to do that, and to this, and so now here we are. Here we are in a world, where a good percentage of the world, I would argue a majority, and if it's not the majority that are Christian, it's the majority that come from Judeo, uh, Christian, and Muslim, whatever, religion, organized religion. All right, and these three religions, Judaism, Christianity, and the Muslim religion, Islam, they are all worshiping the same God. This is three flavors of the same God ultimately. Okay, you have the Judeo, the Jewish, Hebrew background with Yahweh, the God of the Bible or the Old Testament. Then you have the New Testament where his son comes, where according to Christian theology, he is actually his own son. That is the God coming down as his own self, son, whatever, being sacrificed or whatever, being killed so that everybody's sins can be absolved or whatever, as long as you believe in the Christ figure. So, same thing. And then you have Islam coming about from Ishmael. If you remember, Abraham was chosen to be a father of many nations by Yahweh, and he did not have he couldn't get his wife Sarah pregnant or whatever. They were like in their 90s and he's trying to get her pregnant. And so because he becomes impatient about getting a son, he goes and has sex with Hagar, their maid or whatever, and gets her pregnant, and she has Ishmael, and then they end up sending her off, and Ishmael becomes basically the father of what would turn out to be Islam or the Muslim religion. So there it is. So there's a connection. They all come from this one place, this one area, okay? And the Middle Eastern Fertile Crescent area, and they spread out from there, okay? And so now we have what we have now. So to bring it back around to what made me even want to do this video is black people in America. Huge, 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 deeply religious Christian people, okay? Um Deeply religious in the sense of there's a strong belief, regardless of whatever the behavior may be. Where there's not the same type of fundamentalism as you find in like the go hard Christians, white Christians in America. But you know, it was this religion that was given to um to the African people when Africa was invaded, or by the Europeans, or when the Europeans came into Africa and to West Africa and to these nations and brought this Bible. And you know so there you have the spread of it there. So with the slave trade, with slavery, comes a forced um conversion. The slave had to be a Christian. Okay. um and there was this was beat. We were not allowed, my ancestors were not allowed in America to practice um their traditional religions, their traditional spirituality, to worship their gods, and were made to take this Christian God, even though they also were not allowed to read at that time. Okay, but they were still made to take this God because it gave the story, like the story of Ham being one in particular. Also the verses about being obedient to your masters or whatever, and treating your masters on earth because they're like your masters in heaven, all of this other crap. And then the idea that, all the suffering that you're doing is going to be paid back to you when you go to heaven if you just remain an obedient believer. It's not hard to understand why you would want your slaves to have this religion. This religion is based on obedience, regardless of whether people really believe that Yeshua or Jesus came to wipe away the sins of everybody who believe in him. There's still this expectation that you live a quote unquote sinless life. Okay. So, and I'm gonna say sinless, like I said, I started to question all this, or really kind of go against a lot of this stuff when I became an Israelite, because being an Israelite we were on that, oh, we have to follow all these laws or whatever, at least most of them to the best of our abilities or whatever, in order to have these curses lifted from us. And Christians would be like, oh, well, you don't have to do that anymore. You don't have to follow those laws anymore because these laws were all redeemed through Christ. But then at the same time, they'll be like, you cannot cuss and you can't have sex before marriage because that's fornication. And then, of course, you have adultery. Then, of course, you have the 10 Commandments. And then you have, like, you're not supposed to, well, that was us Israelites. You weren't supposed to eat pork, but they could still eat pork. But then they have this strong kind of anti-gay, um, anti-LBGTQ kind of, you know, way of being or whatever based off the Bible. So there's still this idea that you're supposed to be obedient, and the main thing you're supposed to do is believe, 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 believe. The obedience is is captured through guilt. Firstly, all of these things you're not supposed to do, most of this stuff comes just completely out of their ass. There's really no other way to put it. It's whatever the group thinks that you should do. And this is why we have so many different denominations of Christianity, because they all have different ideas of how you're supposed to be a Christian, and what exactly the laws are, and what exactly you're supposed to follow, and what exactly are sins and what are not sins or whatever. But there's this idea that you're supposed to be obedient, and if you're not obedient and you don't follow all these rules, then you are subjecting yourself to the possibility of going to hell. Okay, so you are already being controlled through the feelings of guilt and through fear. Okay, the guilt of having transgressed against this God that created you and loved you and accepted you and all of these things. And, you know, you are just a sinner, a born sinner. Ever since Adam and Eve came, you was born into sin, and just, never good enough, never righteous enough, never this. You're never truly going to be, you're not going to be what Jesus is. So you're just going to have to believe in Jesus or whatever so that he can redeem you of this sinful nature that you have. That is the basic tenet of the religion. So you're already tied in through guilt. Okay. And then you're tied in through fear, the fear of, what if you're not doing this enough? What if you're not doing this well enough? What if you end up going to hell? What if this? You also have this God who's supposed to be watching you, everything that you do, can read your mind, can see your intentions or whatever. That still doesn't stop them from sinning and doing whatever the hell they want to do anyway, and then turning around and asking for forgiveness. Which the issue of forgiveness. Let me see. Do I want to get into this? Okay, we'll get into the issue of forgiveness in a little bit. So let's go back to this slave religion. All right. So not only was black people in America given this religion that they couldn't even fully question properly if they wanted to, because they can't even read the book. Most of them can't even read the book from which this religion comes from, you know? So they're just giving songs and giving, worship. And you have to imagine, if your life is as an enslaved person is from sun up to sundown, you are constantly working, back breaking work, whether you're in a field or whether you're in a house cooking and cleaning up after these fucking people or whatever. You're given this religion. The only time you get to really have the kind of fun you want to have, where you can let loose, sing, dance, be free, or whatever, is probably on Sunday, the day that you're given off, okay, so that you can go off and have your religious ceremony, your church service, where you can sing and you could dance and you could play instruments and you can play the drums and everybody can dance and all the family comes together and everybody comes together. This is going to venerate this religion so much in your mind. It's going to become so sacred to you. And this is why, even through the civil rights era, the black church, even to this day, the black church has the black community in a fucking chokehold, because it's built so much on emotionalism and sentimentality of, we all get together, we all sing, and, you let all your burdens down. This is when you can finally lay all your burdens at the feet of God and pray and look for, this is what gives you the hope to see another day and to continue to be this enslaved person throughout the week, because you get to, believe that this God is doing this for you and is going to deliver you and one day you'll go to heaven. Whatever the case, being that your life is so fucked up, ultimately, that you're in such a bad state, and this being about probably the only joy you have, the only great memories you have, the only real time you get to connect with your family and your friends and the people around you, truly connect with them, um, and everyone believes the same thing, it's not so hard to see why this indoctrination worked so well. And like I said, it's the same thing as maybe the first generation of people who were enslaved needed to have it beat into them. They needed to, and not to mention, um, enslaved people, they brought their systems with them. Again, the use of drums, the use of music, all of this stuff was already a part of the spiritual system and the rituals and the ritualistic system before Christianity even came. It just got, you know, um, amalgamated, or, you know, um, it got blended in. So this all became one thing. As they got rid of their previous gods, they gave all of that energy into this one God. Okay? And this becomes everything. Now, while you are given this as your one source of joy, the images, the physical images that you see of the God is always a white male God, old white male for God, younger white male for the son. Okay? And no feminine figure. Okay? You could just forget that. That's not even something we even talking about in this video. That's for another video, another time. But there's no feminine figure. There is no goddess, whatever. This is just a father, a son, and a Holy Spirit. Okay? And this Holy Spirit, I guess, is who is going to be, pushing you to dance, talk in tongues, pass out, run around a church, all the things that we see in the black church or whatever. This is supposed to be the Holy Spirit, the energy of the Holy Spirit that takes over you, that causes you to do all of this shit or whatever, to feel connected in this, frenzy that you're having where the music is playing and all of these things. You're basically kind of being brought into a trance state, is really what it is, with the music, with the energy, the emotional energy, and all of this stuff. You're just brought into a trance state, which kind of further cements this subconsciously. And you're given these images of who this God looks like, okay, what this God looks like. And there is no question, no matter how much it has, you try to put a black Jesus in there or whatever to try to change it up. At the end of the day, the subconscious has already taken this image of the white male as God. Okay. So your obedience is to the image of God, which is a white male. Okay. When you feel guilt that you've transgressed against the law, you've transgressed against the law of a white male, and you feel guilt for that. Your fear, because of what is it, the fear of God and all of this stuff, that's supposed to be such a beautiful, oh my gosh, you're afraid. And it's kind of crazy because the way I view fear is about the biggest limitation that you have to any kind of growth, not just spiritually, period. You know what I mean? It's not to say that there is not a certain level of fear that's necessary, but fear as an overall whole is a constraint. It's of the energy of Saturn. It constrains, it constricts, and it limits you. Okay? If you are too afraid to leave a yard because there's a dog on another side of a fence barking at you every single time you try to jump over the fence, eventually you're not even going to try anymore. The fear is going to grip you to such a degree that you're not even going to attempt to do it anymore. Because you're afraid of this dog biting you if you were to actually get over the fence. So now what once became, a legitimate fear of a dog biting you for going over the fence, now it just becomes a limitation and a law that you accept as your own. Okay. And so this fear and this guilt and the need for forgiveness, who are you asking forgiveness from? Again, this image of a white male God. Okay. So there is no question that this religion brought tenets that were meant to demoralize and make the followers weak and docile. Okay. And now I will say this, the reason I say this has such a strong detrimental hold over black people in America with this religion, um, is because it's teaching you to worship an image outside of yourself, outside of who you are. And it's correlating the image of this God, this conquering God who has kind of taken over the world through violence, through war, through torture, through murder, as first laid out within the Old Testament. That was the basis and tenet of even one of the first stories, Cain and Abel, is a story of murder. So the basic tenet of this God is to conquer, is to kill, is to destroy, is to take over the land, and then to convert the people or force a conversion onto the people. That's what this God does. Okay, that's what the people of this God do. And that's what they have done, and that's what they continue to do to this very day. To this very day, they continue to do it. So the disadvantage comes in the black people who serve this God, who they have a strong subconscious connection to a white male. So how is this going to be the for white people who basically follow this God? Well, firstly, we already know the women, they're going to venerate their husband. And this is something that the Bible promotes anyway, to venerate your husband as the spiritual leader or basically God of your household in so many degrees. Because, first you have God, and then you have Jesus, and then underneath Jesus is the husband, and underneath the husband is a wife, and underneath the wife is the children. There's this hierarchy and hierarchical thinking. Okay, so there's not a direct connection to the God. You have to go through these several people, or, before you even get there. But, it's going to give the white male more power in seeing his image as the image of God. And so this is why you have ideas such as manifest destiny that created the United States of America, that they have the right to kind of colonize and take over wherever. This is the will of God. And this is still the same language being used to this day. This is what the right has planned for us. in America, that we become a Christian nationalist country underneath this God of the Bible, this conquering God that has to take over everything and everyone, all of your behavior, all of your thoughts. You know, you're constantly giving your energy to this God, and everything you give, no matter how much you give, is never enough because this God gave you life, and so you are indebted in it, indebted to Him. And it's always Him. They always try to act like, oh, God doesn't have an image. Firstly, yes, it does. The image I've already shown on this video, that's the image. We could try to switch it up in different countries or whatever, but at the end of the day, who's being worshipped worldwide? And the situation with CK and the murder of CK recently has really just, it wasn't just black people. I mean, all over the world. I am CK, and just the I couldn't, it was mind blowing. I can't even, I'm not a person who gets mind blown, or I'm so used to the bullshit of this world that most things don't surprise me. But trust me, 2025 has blown the fucking roof off of things for me, and my mind was just blown at the level of worship and veneration that is given to the conquering people, to the colonialists who has used the gun and that book to take over majority of the world, who've implemented themselves as the rulers, as the authorities, through fear, through dominance, through, like I said, guilt. And so this religion, to me, it's not about them serving this religion. It's about how the religion serves them to get the aims that they want to accomplish. I never have truly believed in their love of this God or this religion. I mean, it's brought up a lot, and they have their fundamentalist, and also I did not realize how huge the Mormons were. My goodness, that's a whole different conversation for another day, because their offshoot of Christianity just straight tells you that the black people are cursed. It tells you just straight up what it is. They may not share it visibly and openly, but it just tells you, right, just straight up, this is what it is. This is who should be in charge. Like they let you know. But that's them. That's the Mormons, the Latter-day Saints or whatever. You know, um but I feel like this religion is used by them in order to cement their power. I don't believe that the right in this nation are just such great moral. Honestly, the religion, just the idea that you're going to be this extremely moral person, automatically sets you up for the shadow. Like, and, your shadow side is the side that oftentimes, when you lack consciousness or self awareness, gets repressed in order to maintain your light, which is generally your ego and how you are perceived or how you want to be seen by others. And so you have to deny your shadow, you have to deny your sexuality, and you have to deny the freedom to do this and the freedom to do that or whatever for the sake of obedience. But what generally ends up happening, as is seen with the Catholic Church and their treatment of the young people in their church, is that these repressed desires that they hold in the shadow end up exploding and destroying everybody. That's basically what I see. So this idea of moralism of, if you do these actions, you're a good person, or if you do this and that, or if you follow these rules and you act this way, then you're just such a great person. You know what I mean? Usually leads you further and deeper into the darker side of things than rather if you were just to allow yourself the freedom to embrace yourself for who you are without having to repress, judge, and deny yourself, or call yourself, evil or disobedient, or, demonic or satanic, and all these different things that they say in order to emotionally browbeat you into submission. This is all, used by these people for the sake of control more than anything else. Control for their own dominance and for the submission of others around them, so that they can have the upper hand and accomplish whatever political aims they wish to accomplish, which has been to control this entire world and everybody in it. And the same energy that their God has is that there's never enough. There's never enough obedience. There's never enough following the rules. There's never enough that's ever going to, that you can't give enough. You can't do enough. It's never going to be enough that you're going to do to be considered good, quote unquote. It's a carrot on a stick, you know. It's just never going to get to it. So to me, these tenets make the followers weak and docile because that's what they're supposed to be. I mean, they're sheep. They're literally called sheep, which means that they don't think, they follow, they don't question, they have faith. You know, they don't buck up against the authorities of their day. You know, they're supposed to submit, and they're supposed to forgive when they've been, you know, just because they've been taught that, oh, you've been forgiven, so you must forgive no matter what is done to you. No matter if you've been raped, if you've been sexually assaulted, you know, if your close family member was murdered, you know what I mean? If you were trafficked, taken across lines and separated from your family, like no matter what happens, you're supposed to forgive. And this to me is very much opposed to natural law. Okay, because to me, and this is a video that I'm going to do next. This will be my second video for sure. But the natural law is every action has a reaction. You know, for every cause, there is an effect, and for every effect, there's a cause. All right, this is kind of the basis of the idea of karma. All right, there's a seeking a balance that goes on in the universe. There's a seeking, you know, just as we have dark, we have light. As we have winter, we have summer, you know, or in some places a rainy season and a dry season. You know, as we have masculine, we have feminine. There's a balance in these in this dualism. Now there's also an issue of dualism, which we'll talk about again in a future video. This channel, we're going to talk about so many things. I can't wait. But the fact is that, you know, there's a certain balance. And as I said, for me, karma is very much more connected to cause and effect than anything else. And the only way someone, like for instance, if someone has transgressed against you or done something wrong against you, the only way they can truly understand what they've done is wrong is through your reaction, whatever that may be. um, to not react and to just simply forgive them allows them to never fully know how what they did affected you. And this can allow them to continue believing that everything is fine. You know, every action is kind of looking for its balanced and opposed reaction to temper itself in a way. And I feel like Christianity and the way that it has this idea that no matter what you do, no matter what the effects of what you do are, the effects don't matter. You can do whatever action that you do, but the only thing you have to do to be absolved is to ask for forgiveness. There's no recompense. There is nothing that you need to fix. You know, there's no amends that need to be made. You just ask this God out there somewhere to forgive you. Once you get the forgiveness, which you're going to just be granted as long as you believe in Jesus, you're just going to be granted, which most people are just going to say they do because they don't want to go to hell. So they're just going to say they believe. Once it's granted, then, you know, you're free to just go on about your life and keep on going and doing whatever and repeat the cycle. Just do whatever and then don't worry about whatever fallout or whatever the consequences may be for these actions. You just be forgiven, and that's it. And this is why Christianity is also a great religious cover for egotistical and narcissistic people to prove that they're good, because they don't have to change any of their behavior. They just have to ask for forgiveness. They don't. This is why you have so many pastors and ministers who take advantage of the people that follow them, in every multitude of ways, conning them, taking their money, you know what I mean? Having inappropriate sexual relations with people in their congregation, and then all they have to do is stand up there and say, "Oh, I fell short, and God is still working on me," or whatever the fuck they say, and then automatically you're supposed to forgive them, or else something is, unless now you yourself is facing persecution by this God because you won't forgive them, even though what they did is may be extremely reprehensible and disgusting, you know what I mean, and detrimental to the community and to their environment, but yet as long as they're a Christian, they're good. They get forgiven. So nothing that they do really ultimately matters. You could do whatever the fuck you want to do as long as you have a deathbed forgiveness, clause where you can just get out of jail free, then it's all good. Like all of this stuff, like I said, it not only does it destroy the world, which we've already talked about, the colonialism that comes along with this religion, this the need to use dominance to make all these other people of the world submit and give over their resources and give over their land out of fear, you know, um, by this sign that they conquer, you know, then we have these tenets that make the followers weak and docile, and to give up their power to some authority who claims that they have a higher connection to God than they do. So, it's not only taking actual land, actual resources, destroying actual people, killing off people, taking everything they have and giving it ultimately to the church or whatever. Literally, the Vatican has so many books and artifacts from all these ancient cultures, all just sitting in their fucking library, just taking the shit and hoarding it or whatever, as if they're entitled to have it. So it causes people to be very docile and weak, which means that they're not going to fight back politically. They're not going to fight back in their life, because they're told that the what they're going to get is in heaven and the afterlife. So they don't need to worry about, okay, you can act like you care a little bit about some policy here and some policy there or whatever the case is. But at the end of the day, you're not going to really do anything, because what happens in this life, which they only consider themselves as having one anyway, so they're not going to come back here or return here or ever have to face the consequences of what happened here. Whatever happens in this one life, their whole goal is just to get to heaven. So they're not really trying to do too much. They're not trying to push back too much about what's going on out here, because they're just trying to get to heaven. Their goal is not trying to have a good life on earth necessarily. I mean, they could have a good life on earth, but their ultimate goal is to get into heaven. And if they think, becoming too political is going to keep them, because they're supposed to be in the world and not of the world. So they're not supposed to really give a fuck about this stuff anyway. So, you know, and like I said, as I found out after the murder of CK, that, a lot of these people who support, a lot of these black Christians consider themselves, Christian before they consider themselves black. They don't even feel any kind of connection or affinity to the people and the ancestors from which they came. Their ancestors who were literally tortured and forced to take this religion. They don't feel any connection to them. They don't feel any loyalty to them. They feel loyalty only to the God of this book. That's it. And this is why it's just so this religion destroys it. Everything it touches, it destroys, it degrades. And because you are not even allowed to think about it, you can't even have time to even process what this all means. It is. And I just wanted to touch on, because again, this channel is going to talk a lot about spirituality, and my main thing is this, because I don't subscribe to any particular one spiritual pathway. We are all energy, okay? And energy cannot be created and it cannot be destroyed. All right? We are all energy. We all have a certain level of power, all right? And we all are directly connected to the source. We all are, because that's where we all came, and we all are reflections of that energy, different reflections of that energy. I mean, that will be the most fundamental basis of understanding I have. And that energy can get filtered, just like, a rainbow. You're able to see the colors because through light, you know, um, it filters at different frequencies and creates all these different colors. I feel the same way, about people. We are all energy, and we're just filtering based on our frequency. The light filters through us based on our frequency, creating our own, color, our brand of the god or goddess that we are. I feel there is that it's not no God out there judging you and watching you and telling you how to act and how to be and all this other crap. I mean, who got fucking time? Who got time for that shit? It's so tedious and stupid. I'm just gonna call it like I see it. That's how I see it. You are responsible for the energy that you put out, and the energy that you put out will return back to you. And that's how I feel about what happened with CK. The energy that this person put out, it returned back to him in the most unexpected of ways. Because to me, that's universal law. It's very cyclical. It moves in a circle, it spins around. It spins the block and comes right back around. Okay? So, therefore, as the energy that controls your life, you are responsible for your thoughts, your words, your deeds, and whatever comes from that. And your goal is to bring balance, is to bring a sense of balance. It's not to be good or bad. I don't believe in concepts like good or bad. I look at something I judge a tree by the fruit that it bears. I judge an action by the result that comes from it. And is it detrimental, or is it beneficial? What's going to be the beneficial thing? What's going to be the detrimental thing? And what is it that you're trying to accomplish? And what is your aim? And what is your objective? Okay, because there's a time for everything. The book that I did used to like when I was into the Bible was Ecclesiastes. And there was one verse in there, one chapter in there that talks about, there's a time to reap and there's a time to sow. There's a time for peace and there's a time for war. There's a time for everything. There's a time and a situation where everything has to be done. So the judgment of how I think something should be handled would be based on strategy, discernment, knowledge, using knowledge to strategize and to discern what would be the most appropriate and effective and beneficial action for not just yourself, but as many people as possible. And we are all connected. If we are all gods and goddesses through our energy, then so is everybody else. And so there's a certain level of respect and reverence that all who carry energy should receive. So that would be the basic understanding of how I see and understand spirituality. But again, like I said, there's many, many, many different ways that we come to that understanding and that we can see that reflected in ancient spiritual practices, in the world around us, in nature around us. Everything is a source of learning because this world is all a reflection of us. So that's it. But Christianity destroys that. Christianity gets in the way of that by telling you that you should be obedient and subservient to a God that exists outside of you, and that you are being judged by that energy, and that you are being condemned if you do not do this action or that action that the authority says that you should do. It takes away your own intuition. It takes away your own ability to gain knowledge and to trust the knowledge that you gain. It takes away all of your lessons and everything that you learn to become the person that you are. It gets in between all of that and tells you none of that matters. The only thing that matters is that you say that you believe in this God and that you act out in whatever way you consider good by other people's observation. It's very egotistical. It's very narcissistic. And I already have a video planned that talks about the narcissism of the God of the Bible. But anyway, I just wanted to get on here and get into all of this video. I'm not even going to say much about how long my videos are going to be because I tend to be a little bit of a talker. And once I get in the groove, it might take me a little bit to start, but once I get in a little bit of a groove, then I just kind of go from there. So, um, so you can kind of roughly expect that a lot of my videos will be, an hour, hour and a half, or whatever. I might be able to cut my yapping down to like 30 or 45 minutes one day. That's the goal. But I hope that you gain something, that you gain a bit of knowledge or a bit of perspective from this video. That's my whole thing. The Gnostic viewpoint, gain a viewpoint is a perspective, and gnosis, as I said, is knowledge. So this is what I'm basically trying to provide and give, is a perspective that you may or may not have heard before, and give knowledge that you may or may not have heard. But hopefully I can put it in together in a way that makes sense to you. And if you resonate with it, if you're not already subscribed, please do. If you are interested in getting a reading, I do a karmic natal chart analysis. So if you're interested in that, you can find that in the description. I thank you so much for listening and just being here and supporting just by listening. And I hope you have a great rest of your day, week, month, year. Peace, y'all.